Delighted to have a special guest on our show today, and his name is Tony Wrighton. I've had the pleasure of knowing him for about 8 years now. He has a very varied and different life.
Different. Is that a compliment?
It's a compliment. There's nothing worse than boring or being the same.
Yeah.
He works for us as a TV presenter on Sky International, Sky News, and Sky Sports, and his rapidly growing alternative role is as the founder of the Zestology movement, and I'm going to ask him a lot more about that later on. But Tony, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you could make it today.
So
I know you're busy.
Different, alternative.
There you are.
That's me.
Bouncing it back on me.
Yeah.
So just tell me and our listeners and Mari a little bit about your life as a TV presenter. What does it actually mean? Because, I mean, we can only imagine.
It means that I'm a sports presenter and I present 3 days a week on Sky Sports here in the UK. Most of the time it's a sports news channel. It's great fun. I love sport. And sometimes I present live sports as well and go out to events. Most of the time I'm in the studio here in London. And it means that my job is kind of a passion to a certain extent. Although I think it's very easy to say, follow your passion and do the job that that gives you a kind of sense of purpose and that you really love. I think any job at times has its frustrations. No job is. I don't go into work every day and think this is just the most wonderful thing in the world. I could stay here until midnight. There are frustrations, same as any job, but I do love it, and I love the people that I work with, and I love sport. And that's how you and I kind of became buddies, really, isn't it? Because we trained in NLP together, but we both love sport at the same time. So shared a lot of kind of sporting thoughts together, and that's how our friendship developed. But yeah, so that's my job, and it's pretty cool.
Well, it certainly sounds it. So I know there isn't such a thing as a typical day, but choose a day which is almost typical and tell me what would be the preparation involved on the show and the kind of things that you have to do as I said, preparation.
Well, I'll take tomorrow because today I'm not working at Sky. I'm doing interviews for my podcast today and just hanging out with you. This doesn't count as work, does it? So tomorrow I will be slopping around in scruffy clothes in the morning, much like I'm wearing right now.
I think you look very smart.
I probably wouldn't go to a black tie ball dress like this. But might do a little bit of exercise in the morning, and I get to work about 3 in the afternoon. Tomorrow I'm on air 7 till 10, and this is one of the main differences between radio, which I worked in for 10 years, and TV, which I've worked in for kind of 9 years or so. And that is that there's so much preparation involved. In radio, you could turn up when you liked, and it was all fairly relaxed, and you could chat to people, and you could do a lot of the preparation in your head. TV, totally different ball game. Get in at 3, start checking the diary, start chatting to the producers, start prepping interviews and events that are on. At about 5, bearing in mind I'm on at 7, I'll start to think about what to wear, making sure my tie is straight. They put makeup on us. My hair has to be good. I have to shave, which doesn't come easily to someone who I quite like being fairly laid back in. I didn't even really know how to tie a tie before I joined Sky. And then there are all kinds of strange things that when you're sat for 3 hours in a chair presenting on TV, there are kind of strange things that you need to factor in, like, when am I going to eat? When am I going to go to the loo? Because you only get a couple of minutes to go to the loo in about 3 hours. Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff that needs planning. And then come off air at 10 and unwind, come home, go to bed.
Well, it's to most of us, it sounds absolutely terrifying because most of the time you're live, you're dealing with breaking stories, and even though you have such a detailed plan for the show, there are always going to be changes, I guess. And it would appear that the skills are very different to those that you used in radio, and I think you worked in radio for 10 years, was it, or something like that?
Well, they're very similar, but they're very different, but they're very similar. And my boss always says that he loves hiring people who worked in radio to work in TV because we are professional bullshitters. Basically, you have to put an explicit sign on this podcast.
We might take that word out.
Okay. We are professionally good at talking for a long time when we're not really sure what's coming next. we're very good at filling.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think sometimes the trick of presenting on sports TV and also almost being a journalist, it's not how much you know, but it's how good you are at stretching out what you know to make it sound like sense.
Yeah.
You know, because you can't know everything about every sport. There are always more pronunciations to know, and there's always breaking news about stuff that you just won't know about. So it's about assimilating a lot of knowledge very quickly and then giving it out into the world in a way that is easy to consume for people who need that knowledge. So yeah, I think he likes people who worked in radio because we've learnt long ago how to talk for 3 minutes and make a certain amount of sense. And I'll stop talking now, otherwise it'll be another 3-minute link.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm ready for you. Because you reminded me, do you remember the Olympics in London? 2014, was it?
2012.
2012. Yeah. And we did some pods together on the Olympics was it for Qatar Airways, I think?
Yeah, that was good fun, wasn't it?
It was great fun. And of course, I didn't really know what was going to come up on the show. So you don't know how many hours in research I spent on all of these sometimes obscure Olympic sports.
Did you really?
But
for that show?
I did, and I learned such a lot. I can still remember the Japanese dressage rider who was, is it 76 years old or something?
He was in his 70s.
And he did really well.
That.
Yeah.
That's classic. Yeah, he was in his 70s. He'd gone to about 20 different Olympic Games or something. No, not 20, probably about 10 Olympic Games. And his first one had been, I don't know, 1965 or 66 or something like that. Absolutely brilliant story. I loved that.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to drag you back to TV.
Yeah.
Now, this wonderful job, how on earth did you get it? I mean, what do you have to go to an audition with 1,000 other wannabes? Or, well, you tell me.
Well, I worked in radio for 10 years, and I always felt like I would like to try my hand at TV. And I said to my agent, if ever there is an opportunity to go to a screen test at Sky Sports News, which is the channel I work at now, which is the channel I used to get home from work, put Sky Sports News on and leave it on for 4 hours at a time. It was my dream job.
Yeah.
So I said to him, you know, if it ever comes up the opportunity, then do let me know, because I'd love to kind of try my hand for it. A year and a half later, he got back to me and he said, I've got your screen test. So fantastic. I prepared for it like I've never prepared for anything in the past. I used all the skills of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, which you and I trained in and met on an NLP trainer training course together.
Indeed.
I used all those skills to prepare, and a couple of things I did was, firstly, in terms of goal setting, I wrote down on a piece of paper my goal as if I'd achieved it, with the exact date that I'd achieved it on that piece of paper. So I wrote, the screen test was in August, and I wrote, I am a Sky Sports News presenter and I'm really enjoying my new job. And I dated it, I think something like the 13th of December 2006. That's one of the things that I did to prepare for the screen test. Another thing that I used was the skill of modelling, where you take someone who does something really well and you learn how they do those things and you kind of apply it into your own life. So I started looking at one of the existing Sky Sports News presenters and kind of decided what I could learn from him in the way he dressed, in the way he prepared, in the way he presented the material. And I didn't actually know him, so this was all from just watching him, his sense of humour, how he broke breaking news stories. All for a screen test that was only 3 minutes long, but I did so much preparation for this role. Now, had I known that when I went to the screen test, there were 60 other people having a screen test on that very same day, I don't know if I would have prepared in exactly the same way. But with the benefit of hindsight, I would have, because it was that preparation that actually helped me to stand out from the rest of the people who turned up that day. So a massive amount of preparation. 60 people screen tested on that day, and I was lucky enough to be the only one who got the job, so that was good.
Well done, Tony. And the show today is about what I call logical luck. I'm trying to think of a better word for it.
Logical luck, that sounds good.
Yeah, because there are some things that successful people do that none of which are rocket science, but which most people don't do, and preparation is one of them. And
I always feel so much happier when I've prepared.
Yeah.
You know, and with, sometimes it'll almost be an illogical plan, and it might be a plan that I'll put together. I often do this at Sky and with the podcast as well. I'll put together a plan for a couple of hours. I won't look at it once the podcast is underway, or once the interview is underway, or once the TV show is underway, but the plan's there. It's almost the work that goes in rather than the plan itself.
Yeah. And you'd made this plan, and I love the way that you wrote the goal as if it's already been achieved.
Yeah.
And with Mari and myself in our earlier shows, especially in our first program, which was about goals, we talked about that very subject. And that, again, can be so powerful. And again...
It feels a bit weird, though, doesn't it? You know, when you write down a goal and you write it as if it's already... It makes people feel a bit weird to do that. But there is something about a part of the brain that's kind of aligning itself with your goal as if it's happened.
It definitely is. And in our next program, which is about magic, and that's the kind of luck that isn't easily explained by logic, we're going to talk just about that. But anyway, let's hold that thought for the moment.
Just one more thing on writing a goal down. And I do think that because the law of attraction, you remember the film The Secret in 2007? That is a brilliant film, The Secret, and it inspired a lot of people, and I think even now it's the best-selling, biggest-selling personal development film of all time, by a mile. It took the world by storm.
It did.
And people saw the film, they were like, fantastic. All I need to do is write down the figure £5 million, stuff it into my shoe, and that's what I'm going to get. £5 million are going to drop through the postbox. That's the first step. And I think if you think that this is the only thing that needs to be done, unfortunately, I don't feel like the planets aren't going to align and $5 million or £5 million is going to drop into your lap.
No.
Then it's about, after you've set that big goal, going through the little things day to day, week to week, and the planning that we already spoke about to achieve your goal.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and we're definitely going to cover more of this in this show, and also definitely the next show. But just bring
back to logical luck. Back to logical luck.
Back to logical.
I like that. It's a good title.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I may keep that, Tony, and I'll pretend that I invented it totally myself.
What about logical lock?
Okay. Just a last thing about your Sky job. You'd done all the preparation. You were really up for it. You knew you only had 3 minutes. That sounds... I mean, this was possibly life-altering, changing in a huge way, 3 minutes. How did you keep your emotions under control so that you were cool, calm and collected under the lights?
Well, that is... Have you and I spoken about this before? Have I told you what I did just before it?
Do you know, I think you might have done, but I'd like you to tell me again.
Oh, definitely, And I want to tell you because... I did something just before I went on air. By nature, I'm not highly stressed, but I'm always switched on. So for me, when I manage to kind of retreat and switch off, whether it's meditation or trance or whatever else that I might use, it really helps me to kind of get into a state of flow. So there's a technique known as the Betty Erickson self-hypnosis method, which I used just before I did this. And it just helped to calm me down a little bit to perform at my best. So the 1 minute before I did my screen test at Sky, I was sitting in the room under the lights. I had an earpiece in, speaking to someone. I'd never used an earpiece before, speaking to someone I'd never spoken to or met before about a screen test that, as you say, could have changed my life. And in that 1 minute, for about 15 seconds, I did a little self-hypnosis method just to kind of calm me down and get me into a state of flow. And that was focusing on 3 things that I could see, 3 things that I could hear, and 3 things that I could feel. The reason for doing that is it brings all your attention external. So it stops that monkey mind from going crazy in the 1 minute before what could be the most important few minutes of your life and just gets you switching off. So just for 15 seconds, my brain, it's almost like having a drink of water for the brain. I was able to just chill out a tiny bit and then snap back into reality and get on with it.
Well, I'm so glad you shared that with me, and more importantly, our listeners, because you're giving so many really useful tips to people. And this is not about how you get a job as a TV presenter; it's how you perform better, perform at your peak level, or whatever you're doing.
Switching off is just so underrated, isn't it?
It is.
And the more that I kind of get into meditation, and the more that I understand about meditation, I understand that not only it helps me, but it's scientifically proven to give people more energy, more productivity, a greater sense of well-being. They've run so many tests, and I don't have the scientific studies to hand, but if you search meditation and research online, you'll find so much proof of how this stuff really could make a difference to your day-to-day life. And whether it's meditation or self-hypnosis or whatever you want to use, or the Betty Erickson method, it might make a difference.
It definitely did. And just to remind everybody, our last program was on just that subject. So more on that for those of you who are interested. I never recommend anything that I don't do. I meditate every day and have done since I was the age of 21. And Tony, I know you do your reflective practices. So there we are.
I don't do it every day, though.
Don't you?
Not every day. I have already today, and I'm actually going to a half-hour meditation class after this.
Oh, there you are.
Which is great. But, you know, sometimes life catches up with me. I would like to do it every day. That's something I'm aspiring to.
Good.
But, yeah, not every day at the moment.
Okay. Come on, Tony. Get a piece of paper, write down, I am enjoying meditating every day, and stick it in your pocket.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Now, look,
the date with tomorrow's date on it.
Yeah, now this is a bit of an aside, but as you were talking about the Ericksonian technique you used, I happen to know one of your favourite sports is darts. Now, a darts player got in contact with me. His name's Bob, and he's a very good darts player, but he has tournament anxiety, and so much so that under pressure, he even finds it hard to let go of the dart, or his hand will start shaking.
Yeah.
And I've been working with him, and I taught him a very similar technique to the one that you describe. And I had an email from him earlier this week, and he's just played in 2 tournaments and played very well with no anxiety inhibition at all. Obviously, he was a little bit edgy, excited as you are.
The adrenaline going.
A little bit of adrenaline, but not too much adrenaline, which was his problem before.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So
he did it before the match itself.
I told him to do this, practicing it 5 minutes, morning and evening, every single day. And even when he was in the tournament, when he was sitting down waiting for his turn, to do it then. So I was giving him lots to think about, lots of good things to think about, so that his mind couldn't go back to thinking of things that were going to be less helpful. Anyway.
It's so interesting, though, because I think you find top sportsmen and women, and you would know this as well, some of these guys who operate at the very top edge of their sport, and they might earn a lot of money as well, they have never had any learnings or lessons or coaching in some really basic areas which might be slightly away from the actual clearly defined skills of scoring a goal or throwing a dart. Sure, they've had coaching in that, but they might not have had coaching in the mental approach to the game. And our mutual friend Rhiannon, who spoke at the live event that I organised with you and Rhiannon fairly recently, she's been working with a top footballer for Chelsea. He must earn £100,000 a week, and he's never had any coaching on nutrition at all.
I know.
So his girlfriend brought her around to the house, and the kitchen was just full of rubbish, full of sugar. I mean, how can he be operating at his best if every evening he's cooking stuff that doesn't give him decent fuel to go out and perform on a Saturday afternoon? It's amazing, isn't it?
It is amazing. And you and I were at an event this weekend, and I had the pleasure of speaking to Sir Clive Woodward, who was a keynote speaker afterwards. And he is a person who definitely, every single aspect of a player's performance and lifestyle is under the scrutiny. So, and that's those of you who probably don't know Sir Clive Woodward. He was the rugby coach that took England to the World Cup, and is head of our Olympic movement, and the British Olympic sports are doing better than ever before, which of course I don't think is any coincidence.
Yeah, it's very inspiring when you come across someone who focuses on every level of performance like that. And then it's just so weird when you meet people at the top of their sport, like the Chelsea footballer, and they've never focused on nutrition. I'm sure when he goes to the training ground, they give him a decent meal. But you'd have thought, where the stakes are so high and there's so much money involved, they would pay for a nutritionist for every single first-team player to come and cook them all their meals at home, or at least teach them.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And we're certainly generating a lot of energy with this talk, so much so that a tropical storm has just started outside the window.
I
that you might have
wonder
heard.
if you could hear the thunder on the microphone. Maybe not, but
we'll find out.
Outside.
We'll find out. Anyway, it's authentic. Now, Tony, perhaps that is the ideal introduction to me to talk about something that is not necessarily pleasant, but Mari knows whenever I tell a story, my stories always have a happy ending. Now, it was round about 2 years ago, and I'd had a phenomenal start to 2014, and I'd got into the world of professional poker, which is something that I'd never planned, but I was really loving working with these beautiful minds. And the 1st of March, a young man I'd been coaching won his first ever live event, a very big tournament, over $1 million. And that was just so exciting for him and for me. And I remember firing off an email to you. And I think you were on holiday at that time or had just come back from holiday. And you wrote a very gracious note back, saying how thrilled you were as well. And then you also told me at the bottom, hidden away, that you'd actually been ill. I hope you don't mind me asking you this, Tony, but one of the things that we're talking about in this program is one of the true definitions of success, and that comes under logical luck. You've planted something in my head there.
Logical lock.
It's the way that successful people cope with adversity, because all of us are going to have adversity at some point in our life. And here you were. I got this email from you. That was all that I knew. All I knew that you were feeling ill, and I've never known you ever complain about anything before.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty dark time. I ended up being off work for 3 months, and you were a huge support during that time, I have to say as well. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
Not at all, my pleasure.
But, I mean, the story, as you know, and I'll tell your listeners, is I went on holiday to the Philippines, to the middle of the jungle, to this beautiful retreat called The Farm, where there was nothing more to worry about in the morning than the sound of the chirping birds waking you up outside the kind of log cabin that we were staying at in this kind of tropical rainforest. Beautiful weather, yoga and Pilates classes every day. You could maybe lie in the sun by the pool. And it was a kind of form of paradise until I got ill and contracted this tropical virus. And ended up having symptoms which included numb patches on my face. Every bone in my body felt like it was aching, and just had real fatigue, just no energy to get out of bed in the morning. And ended up having 3 months off work, and I've already spoken about how much I love that job at Sky.
Yeah.
And Sky were fantastic, and they said, take as long as you need. And I needed to. And I there was a long period of time when I was lying in bed at home thinking, am I ever going to get back to full health and back to full fitness? So it's a pretty dark time. And at that kind of darkest moment, I thought it'd be great to do a podcast. And I've even thought of a good name for that podcast called Zestology. But I don't even have the energy to start recording. And I thought if I ever get well again, it'd be great to use the skills of NLP and presenting on TV, but just focus them towards finding out why and how people live with energy and vitality. And sometimes it's really good when you ask me about that story and when people ask about that story, because it kind of brings me back to why I'm doing the podcast now. It's easy to get caught up in day-to-day life now, and I'm fine again now. But it's good to remember the reason that I'm doing it is because I know from all the Googling that I did at that point that there are many others in a similar or even worse dark place. And if they could get any inspiration from my podcast, that would be a really, really cool, nice thing.
Okay, and so you had this illness. I'm assuming, in fact, I know that you did go and see some very good doctors.
Yeah.
And what did they tell you? What did they say? Did they say they couldn't help you? Or?
Well, I don't want to be too negative about profession, Steve, but they didn't give me very much help.
Okay. Well, maybe they couldn't, in fairness.
And modern medicine just hasn't clearly defined some of the viruses that are out there in the world. We think we're really advanced compared to how Caesar lived 2,000 years ago, but actually there's just so much that we don't know. And the doctors really said to me, we know that you've had a virus. That's the good news. And I said, fantastic. What virus? And they shrugged their shoulders and said, well, we don't really know. Because they don't know. There's viruses out there that they don't know what happens. And for me, they said it wasn't the viral impact, it was the post-viral impact. Your body does strange things once it's had a virus.
Yeah.
So yeah, the doctors weren't that much help. They were very sympathetic. But also, when you go and see a doctor, the way that the medical system works is they, in the old days, a doctor would be with your family from birth until death. And every year you would pay the doctor a certain amount to keep you healthy. And you would pay the doctor a certain amount to keep your family healthy as well. And if at any point anyone got ill in the family, the payments would stop. Now, I think that's the way we should pay doctors these days.
That's a good incentivization program.
So these days, of course, we pay our doctors when we get ill, not when we stay healthy.
Interesting.
Which it's strange when you think about it. But actually, I found once I started to get some kind of alternative therapies, that's when I really started to get well again.
Yeah. Well, you know, an awful lot of medical doctors listen to this podcast and podcasts like it. Doctors are much more open-minded, I think, than they were in the past. And in defense of them, well, heck, they can defend themselves. Viruses are the final frontier, well, the last frontier in medicine. I mean, what's yeah, they are. And we don't know hardly anything about them. I mean, what's this latest one that started in Brazil?
The Zika virus.
I mean, I was just saw on the news yesterday, they think it, not only can it cause these terrible birth defects, but a condition called Guillain-Barré syndrome, when people become totally paralyzed. In fact, their lungs become paralyzed, so they die because they can't breathe. I mean, this is absolutely dreadful. And at the moment, there's no cure for these things.
Yeah, and I agree. And just to follow up, because I don't want doctors to think I don't like them, I'm not talking about the doctors themselves. I'm talking about the system.
Yeah, I understand.
How can you, as a GP, possibly know and give a holistic overview of someone's health when you only see them for 10 minutes every 6 months?
Now, the curious thing, there you were lying in bed, you had absolutely no energy, and I can remember that. I can remember when I met you for a coffee, and you could barely walk a few yards down the road.
We met at the end of the street, didn't we?
Did,
and that was the extent of all my exercise for a particular day.
Yeah.
But I still did feel more energised after we'd met for a coffee.
Oh, well, good for you. But the curious thing is...
Good for you.
Good for me, thank you. I think you actually bought me a coffee as well now. I'll have to buy you one. But there you were lying in bed, had no energy. I mean, what on earth made you think of starting something called Zestology? And that word zest, I mean, it means everything about abundant energy and sparkle and all the rest of it. Didn't you feel that was sort of incongruous?
Well, yes. And what I thought was, if I ever get well again, I'd love to do this. And it's a great idea. But I need to figure out how to get well.
Yeah.
And it took almost a year from that point to starting the podcast. Because after 3 months, I started to go back to work 1 day a week. I took it very slowly, but I didn't feel in a position where I had enough energy to record the podcast. But it should be pointed out that even now, my approach on the podcast is not to say, oh, you should live your life like this, or you should do it like this. My approach is, look, I would love to have more energy. Give me some ideas. Let's speak to the experts and find out what they've got to say. And maybe share some of my experiences along the way of what helped me get well. But I never like to preach. And I know that's your approach as well. So,
It is. And I guess this is a good time for me to mention that Tony's podcasts, they're all on iTunes, they're all free, and we must remember to put a link to his website on the show notes so that you can all, because I mean, Tony's he's blushing now, but the truth is
not that much. I'm quite enjoying it.
Yes, the truth is that Tony somehow has attracted world experts to be the guests on his shows,
like you.
Well, I'm humbled now, but I mean, people, far more eminent in their field than perhaps I am. But they're well worth listening to. But Tony, to shortcut the process for us, you've spoken to all of these experts. I know that you've made changes in your own life. What are a few, really fundamental tips that you can share with us all now?
And I know this stuff works, and I know what I'm about to tell you is the stuff that works for me because I've tracked it all. I've spent 9 months writing down all the stuff that I did on a particular day, the lifestyle practices that I followed, how much exercise I did, what I ate, and then giving subjective scores to my level of energy, for example, so I can tell what's worked and what hasn't. The first thing, and the main thing that resulted in an increase of my energy levels of up to 20%, was switching off and retreating. And it's really interesting because we've already spoken about meditation, but I found when I switched off my phone and computers for up to 8 hours a day, so it's quite a long time. You can't do that every day if you're working in an office and you need the internet, for example. But when I switched off for up to 8 hours a day, my energy levels increased by up to 20%. So that's made a real difference.
Yeah, and so many people say this, don't they? And We actually mentioned this in our last program as well, and it can actually be quite frightening when you turn these machines off because you've become addicted to this constant arousal that they give you.
I find that, and this is a work in progress for me. Even now, we've been chatting and recording this podcast, and I haven't checked my email or my phone for kind of an hour and a half or so. Even now, I feel like, I wonder what I've missed. Fear of missing out. People will talk about FOMO. I'm like, I wonder if, that girl's texted me, or I've had an email about that podcast, or whatever it might be. And it's a constant battle because these phones and these devices, they're not made to make us better people. They are made so we use them as much as possible. They are made to distract us and entertain us. But that's not always what's best for us.
Well, that's a great tip, and I've definitely taken that advice. It is difficult. One has to wean oneself off, but it does get easier. Now, what else, Tony? What else have you tried?
There was something that when I didn't do it on a particular day had a negative impact of minus 22% on average on my energy levels. And that was, I was really interested by this, and that was when I didn't organise any fun for a particular day. When I had a day when I was really grinding hard, it was a work day that wasn't particularly inspiring, and it was, sitting in the car on the way to and from work. And some people might be thinking, well, that's most days. But it's not necessarily, because fun might be something as simple as going for a walk in the park, or throwing a frisbee with your friend, or just calling a friend that you haven't spoken to for a while and just having a good chat which is nothing to do with work, or getting together with a good buddy and recording a podcast. When you schedule some fun into your day, you might find that it increases your energy levels. It certainly does for me. I was amazed by that, actually, because I wasn't sure that would have that much of an impact, but now I know that it just has more of an impact than anything.
It doesn't surprise me. And again, going back to this event last weekend, I sat in on a very interesting speech by a professor of mathematics who was talking about creativity. And he mentioned all of the research that's been done on meditation and mindfulness and other things too. And the interesting thing is that the effect is magnified by doing something like walking at the same time. It's as if you're bypassing that over-controlling conscious mind and getting straight to the unconscious, which is 30,000 times more powerful. And yet so few of us know how to access that area.
I've started,
including us, of course.
And I've noticed walking is a really good example, actually, because I've always loved playing sports. And I've always loved walking, but over the last 3 or 4 years I've become more conscious of the fact I love walking. And I've started organising a couple of holidays recently, just for a couple of days at a time, where I go away and just walk. And it's great. You can chat for so much. You can talk so much when you walk. You can relax. And there's a purpose as well. So you're not just lying by the pool. You're actually getting out there and doing something. And that's fun on a holiday as well. So that's, even my holidays are changing through exercise and
Yeah. And would I be going too far to suggest that this illness that you had literally was life-changing, and your attitudes and behaviours, you as a person, are significantly different to the person before you were ill?
Definitely.
And,
I mentioned therapies work for me as well.
Yeah.
One of the things that really worked for me was tapping.
Yes.
And that is known as emotional freedom therapy.
Yes.
It's based on the principles of acupuncture, where some of the acupuncture spots around the body are so close to the surface of the skin that you actually don't need to stick a needle in. You can just tap them with your fingers. And if anyone wants to know more about this, you can just Google EFT and find out a bit more about it. And you can start tapping on yourself straight away.
Yeah.
I went to this amazing guy, and he started to help me let out all the intense emotion and stress that was surrounding the fact that I wasn't working. And that had a huge impact on me. And at the start, it was really day to day. I was just fighting to get through the day. Sometimes, it's no exaggeration to say that there were a few occasions when I felt so sick and so bad that I thought I was going to have to call an ambulance.
Good grief.
Thankfully, I didn't have to, because there are, of course, many people who do have to call an ambulance. Yeah. But I realise now that a lot of it wasn't in my head. I was genuinely experiencing those symptoms.
Yeah.
But because of what was going on in my head, I wasn't allowing myself to heal, and I wasn't getting myself out of fight or flight response.
Yeah.
So after I kind of got out of that kind of surviving from day-to-day mechanism, then with the EFT and everything else that I've learned, I started to go much deeper into my own personality and my reaction to stress and emotion. it's a journey that I'm still on now, but it's been so good and had so much depth to it, and I've learned so much about myself that I wouldn't change it. If I could go back and not have that illness again, I wouldn't change it. I'm just glad that I did, because here I am.
Tony, that is absolutely stunning, because I was going to try with as much sensitivity as I could to ask you that very question. If you could put the clock back, would you change it? And the answer you gave me is what I would have guessed. And so often when I meet people who have even had, permanent disabilities, losing a limb, can you believe it? And they say, I wouldn't change it because I have got so much. So I hope that gives hope to people.
Yeah, that's so weird you mentioned that, because I interviewed a Paralympian cyclist this morning.
Oh, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, and he talked about the same thing. And when he was 5, he was diagnosed with an illness that has left him almost totally blind, 95% blind. It's like if you put your 2 fists in front of your eyes, and then you put some kind of gauze around the side of your eyes. He can barely see anything, and he's legally blind. And yet he said he would never go back and change it. He's so pleased that being legally blind has given him the opportunities that it has in life, and he's lived the life that he has. And he feels that he's achieved so much more because of being blind. So he wouldn't change it.
Yeah, well, those stories are inspirational, and I hope that they do inspire people who are fighting their own battles. In fact, those are not good words to use, fighting battles. Moving through whatever it is that they're moving through.
Challenges.
Tony, we could go on and on, but sadly at some point I have to say
Is it time already?
There's time already, but what I can promise you is that you are definitely going to be back on the shows again, because we've barely touched the surface. So thank you very much for contributing today. It's been a real pleasure.
Well,
good luck with everything.
Thank you for having me on as well. And obviously you are a great friend of mine, and I'm honoured to be on your show, and I've really been loving listening to your podcasts as well, and I hope you invite me on again.